Hello everyone, your boy Matthew East here. So I'm doing a vlog today. I'm going to be speaking to a far left political group tonight about market design and describing my experiences working in healthcare and how the way that we design markets and incentives, financial incentives within those markets, changes how vulnerable people are cared for and what they can access and what they can't access. Um, but it's got me thinking mainly about, well, basic how basic political stuff and how people relate to politics. So there is a tendency for people who have an interest in politics to ascribe things to large, big level stuff, why society isn't functioning, to very big structural problems. Now, people who talk to me, people who know me, know that I'm all about structural problems. Like, if there's two things that describe what I'm angry about, it's angry with the government and angry about capitalism and the structures of capitalism. Now, that isn't my views on these things are quite nuanced. Don't expect me to be wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt anytime soon, but there's a tendency in these communities to forget the really basic, simple stuff. I haven't seen this in every left-wing political group that I've been to, but people often forget that community starts at the bottom. It starts with who you're associating with and what you're trying to build. When I was younger, I was part of a group called Rotaract, which is the younger version for Rotary. And we'd have all these people from Young Labour occasionally drop by, and it was usually when we had a local leader come to speak. Often they were there for a bit of a heckle, or something similar to that. Our frustration with them was that whilst they were certainly interested in the community, they weren't really interested in building anything in it. They were more interested in feeling a sense of civic involvement rather than fixing problems. And that's a dangerous thing. And often the solutions to society, they're very simple. Very simple. You want to call yourself an environmentalist? Well, you're going to have to pick up a couple of pieces of rubbish when you walk out the house if you want to be able to call yourself that and honestly say that you're living by your values in that. If you say that you're against homelessness and concerned about the scarcity of housing in Australia, if you've got a spare room in your house, you should probably lend that out on Airbnb. Well, if you're able to do that, if you've got the psychological capacity to have someone else in your house. It's often these very simple things. And whilst we may all have different ideas about how we should handle environmental problems, I know that the Canberra Liberals, for example, they're very concerned about the treatment of wildlife here and making sure that it's taken care of in a humane way. Whilst at the same time they'll block ecological policies that protect certain wildlife. They've got a different approach to it, which is coherent with their ideology. A lot of the very simple stuff can just be done by anyone. You see a piece of rubbish, pick it up. You've got a room in your house you can lend it out. Some things aren't, though. If you are using Airbnb, buying up houses, using a mortgage, and then renting it out on Airbnb, and inflating the pricing house crisis, well, then you're just a capitalist swine. But so when we look at something like ideology and how it interplays with people in their day-to-day life, it's difficult to measure and describe using psychological terms. The discipline which primarily focuses on ideology is sociology and maybe anthropology. This is when we look at political ideology, what we're really looking at. The best psychological description of it is an idea called field theory. So field theory is the idea that uh, the way that we perceive and understand the world, it gets shaped by understanding like already existing deep beliefs. So we're not going to and what our attention gets drawn to are going to be those things which are associated with those deep beliefs. So it's about control of attention and what we see. It's an old theory. There's probably more current constructs which describe the same phenomenon, but this is what I can remember. So when we're looking at like the way someone perceives a situation, it's already going to be completely changed by existing thoughts and beliefs. That's the core of it. It's not a very complex idea, but it gets to the gist of things, and it's a good basis for the rest of my description and my understanding of some events which have passed. So, like, I have no generational wealth. I'm broke as fuck. I've spent the last 3 years being oppressed by just corporate shitfucks and who exploit vulnerable people and the NDIS and various healthcare systems. Um, and I'm pretty chewed out by it. That's why I've become got involved in community politics. Um, but in this time, I kind of realized that the way that I view the world isn't just based on my experience. It's also very much based on ideology. And the clearest example of this was a very basic community development project, very basic, running a share house. Many people have done it, where I had this amalgamation of different political ideologies and different perceptions of that house and my involvement with it. So again, my background is politically is far left in a materialist sense. I have some small involvement in environmental groups, but really I'm like, I believe in community. I believe that people need to work together cohesively. I think that there's no such thing as independence. I think we are all necessarily interdependent. And when there is like a belief of independence and like this idea of the self-made man, what we're really looking at is someone's access to capital in most instances. I know some rare exceptions, like I had a friend who's a very successful beautician who came from the bottom and now owns several businesses. And I look at those examples with a lot of pride, and I with a lot of respect. But in most instances, I've found, particularly when I've been around the sons of merchant bankers and who are now doctors, or people who have grown up, gone to expensive private schools, and then I see them a decade later where they are compared to where I see the clients that I saw on the NDIS scheme who grew up in poverty and don't really have a good trajectory forward. Well, like the advantages and disadvantages that people have become very prominent. Um, and because of this, I kind of see the solution to people in these situations, people like myself who don't really have a lot of advantages, is working collectively with other people in the same situation to better our circumstance. The most basic example of that is a share house. I ended up finding myself running this share house, which had been built up by basically a trust fund kid and a group of his friends. And to me, this was an opportunity for people who had less advantage to be able to live well, because there was some great appliances and it was a beautiful home at really the same price of what it would be to rent out an apartment individually. I had a great price on the house. I had a good relationship with the landlord, and he was also a community-oriented person. And I wish this man very well. Now again, my background is in the far left. The way I view things is in a sense of how do we build community? How do we improve society? And it's comes from the lens of uh, collective action, but direct action. So I'm not interested in people who I'm not one of those people who just gets angry at something. I'm the person who is interested in opportunities to take action on things. Um, and there's different ways of going about this. So, for example, the Liberals believe that what we need to do is that we need to. They've got a different attitude to this. They want to create independence in individuals. They want people to be able to fend for themselves and they want there to be a degree of social support to be able to create that. That's the ideology of social liberalism, which has historically been, before the 1980s, was the governing ideology of the Australian Liberal Party. I'd say it's actually the current ideology of the Canberra Liberal Party. I've got a different view to this, but when the local member Elizabeth got elected, she's the leader of the Canberra Liberals. Whilst I have a very different political ideology to her, I sent her a congratulations email because I saw her as a person who is oriented towards the care of the community and is a person who's interested in practical action. There's certainly many things the Canberra Liberals do which are not practical, but that's I individually I don't hate her. But there's this other side of capitalist ideology which I don't like, and that's this love of wealth and this seeing as wealth as a status thing rather than as a tool for community building and a tool to be able to improve society. And whilst running this share house, I had these different populations of people come through. And the ultimate goal of the share house was for me to build a small group of people who were good, close friends and would be able to work towards, building up nest eggs for ourselves by sharing expenses and sharing labor. It's historically the 8-hour work week, the 8-hour workday was designed around the idea that we'd have 8 hours for sleep, 8 hours for recreation, and 8 hours for work. So that was back in the days where we would have where there was this clear separation of domestic duties. Most people were married at a young age, and there was and a lot of the administrative and domestic duties were done by the female partner, whilst the work which was involved in that 3 8-hour stretches in that 24-hour period was done by the male. And now that's not something which is available to most individuals. It's not saying it's even necessarily a desirable thing, but there is. People in modern society are time poor, and their ability to pay attention to things which are of benefit to them to be able to progress their lives has been taken away. We're always working. We don't have a chance to stop. It requires a very high degree of organization that many people just don't have to be able to cope with this. And so being able to share domestic duties, being able to build up capacity to live in community, to be able to have mutual assistance, is something which I see as very desirable. And that's kind of why I believe share houses are a solution to a lot of the issues that millennials and Gen Z people are facing. If you do not have generational wealth, it is very difficult to own property. But what I find is that if you don't have this community orientation, it's like the way that my share house project was perceived by some was very different. So because it was a beautiful home, I found that some people perceived it as like a show of wealth when it was really a show of community development and community effort. Even though I was the person who paid the bulk of the rent, I did that willingly because I was trying to build something for the community, for us. But this is where I find it very frustrating, particularly in Canberra. Canberra women are something else. I come from regional Queensland, from a town called Toowoomba, or city really. And there isn't the same divide in social class in Toowoomba than there is in places like Canberra. I remember having an ex-romantic interest who was trying to suss out if I was going to inherit any intergenerational wealth before forming a relationship with me, because she currently had a partner, and at the same time she was trying to figure out how much money she's going to get from the divorce by looking through all his assets, by attending auctions and things like that. Now, that same woman, when I ended up losing everything due to entering fugue states as a result of just the insane stress I had in my previous job, and briefly being homeless, was actually angry for some reason that I was homeless, because now I didn't have any wealth, even though we hadn't spoken in many years, and if I'm honest, I had nothing to do with. This is the same time that one of the people who was living in this house, who was an Instagram influencer, who was a woman as well, who kind of, like, I don't know, thought I was going to be her sugar daddy or something. We had such a strange relationship. There was a lot of strange dynamics going on there. Was angry at me for now being homeless, because in her mind I was going to be her sugar daddy. She didn't understand the project. And I have to attribute these things to just wildly different beliefs in political ideology and society. So when I this this home, these resources, they were to me resources for people to use and enjoy. But because of the way that our society runs, because wealth is is just so fucking sought after. I don't know, like, it doesn't need to be, but it seems it's associated with individual status. So the ability for people to feel good about themselves compared to others, and go up and down in the social hierarchy, is related to wealth. But it's separate from its utility function. Like, certainly wealth gives people options. It gives people the ability to retire. Gives people individual utility, but it doesn't need to separate community. Yet it does, and it seems to, based on ideology and the inherent beliefs about wealth rather than its utility function. Now, ultimately, the lessons which can be learned from this, they're pretty basic. Okay, well, maybe a bit more than that. So the issue that I had is that I had the asset before I had the community, and that meant that I had people who were, because I had something under my direction. So I had access to the lease for the home. I had access to the necessary relationships to run this beautiful share house, and to try and build a community to enjoy this with. Like, before I had the community, what happened is that I had people who were attracted to the material rather than to the project. So for people who are interested in doing this kind of thing, the way to go about it is, the first thing you do is that you find a group of like-minded people, and then you acquire the assets. It's the same way that people say that the human resources of a company are the most important resource, because that's where you get your input, your ideas, and your mutual connection and labor. And that's the purpose of a share house, is to be able to have shared labor and shared resources. Is that you need to have that system in place before you get your assets. Those people obviously need to be people who get along, and they need to be people who have ideally a similar outlook. I'm not saying, like, that this is not a project which is exclusively to the left. Share houses are a very basic thing. A lot of the issues to resolve societal problems are very simple things. You're an environmentalist, pick up the rubbish that you see when you walk out the house. You are a person, a millennial, who doesn't have access to generational wealth. You live in a share house, right? It's not something which is confined to the left or right of politics, but when you're doing it, for other people who are engaged in this kind of thing, which is a lot of people, the key is to build your network before you acquire your assets. It's a very simple lesson, and that's the conclusion of this video for today.